Last Sunday, we talked about the first part of the story. And now I guess you could say you get to hear the rest of the story. Because while there are actually two stories, or at least two parts to this story, there is one overreaching story that may be easy to miss when you read both of the versions. Last Sunday we talked about the prodigal child from the point of view of the lost child, and to some degree about the father. Today I want to shift gears just a little bit, and I want to look at this story from a different point of view. I want us to consider how the older brother saw this situation and what he was feeling and what he was going through as he was watching all of this love and gifts that were being thrown out to the younger brother. What it meant for the older brother to feel like the rejected child, not the lost child. Have you ever been rejected? Have you ever felt rejected? How did it feel? Probably not real good. It doesn't feel good to be rejected. Have you ever just thought you were rejected? Maybe not really truly having been rejected. Have you just thought you were? You know, rejection can be, I think, one of the most painful experiences that we can go through as humans in our life. They reject me, they don't care, they don't love me anymore. All of those feelings are really pretty bad. And they have to do with how we feel about ourselves, our self-esteem, and our ego. Ralph Keyes is an author who wrote a book, Is There Life After High School? And he wrote that Mia Farrow has never forgotten the fact that one time every girl at the prom was asked for a dance except her. No one asked Mia Farrow to dance at that dance. Charles Schulz of Peanuts cartoon fame, and I say the great philosopher because I use his cartoons for philosophy sometimes, he never forgot that his yearbook staff in high school rejected every single cartoon that he ever submitted. Movie actress Ally McGraw confesses the fact that she never had one date in all of high school. Henry Kissinger is best remembered by his classmates as the kid that nobody ever wanted to have lunch with. Rejection can indeed be one of the most traumatic things that can happen to any one of us. I think I have a master's degree in being, and more importantly, feeling rejected. In my various careers that I've had, including the ministry, I've been in positions where I was going to fail, be rejected almost daily. And it never, ever feels good, no matter how it comes, the feeling of rejection. There is no pain, I think, quite like it in the whole world. That awful pain of feeling rejected. It hurts. It crushes the spirit. It breaks the heart. Notice that I'm talking about the feeling of being rejected, not necessarily the act of being rejected. You see, that word feeling is really important when we talk about rejection. Sometimes we feel rejected when we really are not. There's an illustration about a man who quit going to the football games because he thought every time the team gathered together in a huddle, they were talking about him. He wasn't being rejected, but he thought he was. And that's what's important. Even when the rejection, the feeling is not real, the pain is real. Even the strongest persons don't hold up well or for very long when they come to feel rejected. And those painful feelings of being rejected and feeling that way can literally pull the rug out from under us. And we see it very plainly today in this story of the prodigal child. You see, the older brother is depressed. He's emotionally crushed because he feels rejected. His father, of all things, is rejecting him. And even though the parable is really all about the Father, the goodness of the Father, the faithfulness of the Father, the never-ending love and the unconditional love of the Father, the elderly brother missed the whole point. He mistakenly felt rejected, and that feeling of rejection left him spiritually bankrupt. You see, the feeling of rejection can do that to us, but the Christian faith has good news. For us Christians, that's the news of the good news that we talk about, the good news of healing, the good news of wholeness, the good news of forgiveness, the good news of love. When you feel like you're being rejected, maybe there's some things that you can use as simple guidelines to remember so that it doesn't have the crushing pain. First of all, remember that the feeling is only temporary. And then you go talk to somebody about it. Get it out. Talk to somebody. Don't accept that feeling of being rejected as something that is permanent, that is here to stay. Remember these 4 little words. This too will pass. This too will pass. You can kind of think of the feeling of rejection like you think of the weather here in Texas in the Southwest. It changes on a minute-by-minute basis. Know that this too will pass. You see, dark clouds do come. They come in your life and my life and everybody else's life. And we do have that feeling of being rejected and not loved and not cared for. But remember, when we say this too will pass, that these dark clouds will pass and the sunshine will come out in your life again and it will be clear. Secondly, remember that the person who is probably causing you to feel rejection, they may be the ones who have the problem. Let me give you a little illustration that I found from another pastor. This pastor wrote about a hospital visit that he made. He had to go make a hospital visit on a little 4-year-old girl who had undergone surgery. And when he entered the room, the little girl put her hands up over her eyes as if to say, I don't want to see you. I refuse to acknowledge your presence. She was rejecting him because she thought he was another doctor, and she'd had enough of doctors for her young life. She didn't want to see anymore. And so her parents and the pastor had a pretty good laugh over this young 4-year-old's cold shoulder treatment of the pastor, and they thought it was kind of cute for a little 4-year-old to take that kind of action. But the pastor said, you know, that in itself is almost kind of like a parable of life. Sometimes, he says, when people are hurting, they express their hurt like that by rejecting other people. So if somebody rejects you, it may well be just a red flag that they're having a bad time and you happen to come along at the wrong time. Third, remember to laugh. Don't take yourself so darn seriously. Laugh. Oftentimes, the best humor is to be able to laugh at ourselves. I know it's sometimes humorous to see others do kind of silly, funny things. Watch a young child learning how to express themselves. Watching the comical antics of clowns or comedians. But the real mark of maturity is to be able to laugh at yourself. And when you can laugh at yourself, it eases all of the self-pity that you've mustered up. And it helps you to remember not to take things so darn seriously. When you feel rejected, remember that it's only temporary and go talk it out with somebody. Remember that the person rejecting you is probably the one with the problem. And remember to laugh at yourself and to use your humor. Fourth, and finally, remember the real important part of the message today, that God accepts you. God is with you. It says so very clearly in the whole passage. And this is, of course, the most important part and probably the key element of all of the Gospels. It is the real good news for all of those who may feel rejected. It is the point of the parable, the gracious, accepting, caring, non-ending love of God the Father. William Barclay, a wonderful Scot preacher and theologian, put it like this: so then, for me, the supreme truth of Christianity is that in Jesus, I see God. When I see Jesus feeding the hungry, comforting the sorrow, befriending the rejected, I can say, this is what God is like. All through his life, God was saying to us, through Jesus, I love you like that. When he healed the sick and he touched the untouchable and he loved the unlovable, he was saying, I love you when you're like that. Then when he endured the insults, the injuries, and the disloyalties, and he suffered the cross, he was saying, there is nothing in this world that you can do that will ever stop me from loving you. When you feel rejected, remember that God never rejects you. God accepts you. You are important to him. You are valuable to Him. And I often think, when I think about these kind of thoughts, of being a parent myself, and I'm sure many of you can relate. In raising my kids, there were so many times when I just wanted to grab them and shake them, or maybe something else, or even say some things that I might even be sorry for later. But I always remember, and I always know, and of course I know now as I look back, there isn't one thing they could do that ever caused me to not love them. And that's the way I look at our Heavenly Father. There is not one thing, not one, that I can do that the Father would say to me, I don't love you and I reject you. He would not do that. And so we need not fear rejection. Robert Fulton, you've all heard of him. He invented the steamboat. He was an artist and an engineer, and he was responsible in the 1800s for putting sailing ships out of business. He made the steamboat the standard on all of the open seas. And he didn't let the threat of rejection stop him from his quest as inventing and developing the steamboat. It is said that he presented his plan and need for money to Napoleon. And Napoleon listened for a few minutes of the presentation, and then he just stopped him. It said, "What, sir? You would make a ship sail against the wind and the currents by lighting a bonfire under wooden decks of a ship? I pray you, excuse me, I have no time for such nonsense." See, you don't have to look very far or spend any great length of time to find that the one who has time to listen to you and the one who will never reject you is God the Father. And listen in our story to what the Father tells the older brother, because it's so true for what the Father tells you this morning. You are always with me, and all that I have is yours. And to that, we could add and be scripturally correct. God says, the Father, I am always with you, and you always have my never-ending love and forgiveness. You will never, ever be rejected. Amen. Our invitation hymn this morning is on page 464. If you rise as you're able, we'll sing God of Grace and God of Glory.